Thank you. So, my name is Erik Hellman. Those who haven't heard me before or seen me before, I used to work as one of the lead architects for Sony Mobile, where I learned Android. Now I'm working with Spotify, which is awesome and really scary because everyone is so smart. So I'm slightly intimidated. So this was actually the hardest presentation for me to do, because when I was writing it, I was like, everyone knows this, at least everyone at my work. So yeah, let's hope there's something new I can tell you guys here about Android. As some of you might have seen in the presentation abstract, I wrote a book. So Wiley, the publisher, contacted me and said, hey, write a book, it will be great. We saw a presentation of you in London and you did great. We think you will be great for writing a book. Of course I will be. I'm so cool, I could probably write a book in my sleep. So 2 months later, I'm slightly panicking. Well, this was like exactly what my wife told me. Yeah, you will be so panicked and you will be so busy with this, so we won't be speaking to each other for half a year. Which was okay, because she was doing her thesis at the same time, so we basically was just sitting opposite each other. And well, finally, I got the book out. Yay! I don't recommend anyone to write the book unless you actually do have time left, and you don't have kids and stuff like that. Or if you really do want to write a book, of course you should, but it takes more time than you think it does. You can find more information about the book there, that address. Also, I'll be giving out one book today for the best question. So what was the biggest problem writing the book? This was the biggest problem writing the book. It wasn't that I don't like it. I love JetBrains tools. I use in Android Studio since the first version. I was thrilled that they launched it. The problem was that I had written the chapter about development tools already, and it was fixed and set and ready to be sent to the printers. And then Google comes at Google I/O and says, yeah, we changed the whole development tool series. Ah, thanks. I'll rewrite the first chapter. That's okay. No problem. Anyway, I'm not going to talk more about how it was to write the book. I'm actually going to bring up stuff from the book. And how many of you are Android developers? Well, most of you. That's nice to see. So it's actually more, this session is more about effective Java for Android, how to use Java in the best way to write your apps, how to use APIs in the best way. Hello, Torbjörn. How to do this in a smart way. So besides my book, you need this one. How many of you have this book? How many of you have read it? How many of you really read it? How many of you are doing what it says all the time you write Java? And I didn't see a single hand up in the air. What is the first item in this book? Sounds familiar? So, the first thing you should do when you start writing Java, at least for Android, is stop using new completely, or at least as far as possible. So, let's say you have this class. You create a ton of these. You need them a lot, and you pass them around in all your application. So what you do is you use this pattern. You have an obtain method, which is static, which returns your object from a pool of objects, or create it on demand. And then you have a recycle method, which you call later. This is used throughout the whole Android platform. For instance, the handler class, the motion event, etc., parcel objects. So it's used everywhere. So whenever you're writing your own classes in Android, and these are classes you create a lot, you use them all over the place, this is what you're going to do instead of using new. First lesson. So how many of you use multi-touch features in your app? None? One. That's great. So there's like these gesture things, like we have this pinch zoom, and we have the scale gesture, and we double tap and everything. One thing that's lacking is this one. You can find it in the Android apps, like rotation things, right? So anyone have a suggestion how to calculate gesture rotation? Trying to get you started here, so you have to be fast. So all these slides will be available later, so you can just look at the code. Or take the book, of course. Math A10-2. So that's what you use to calculate rotation in angles. Now you also need to limit this one because of the behavior of this function. So you need a clamp method. And finally, what will you do in your onTouch method is this. Calculate the angle, check it against the previous angle, update the rotation, and voila, you can do rotation gestures in your app. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, tons of games and other heavy interaction things where you do it, like drawing applications, photo applications where you want to edit photos by rotating them, etc. And this is really hard to find information about somehow. I was like trying to verify that I'm doing the right thing here, and it's really hard to find any other examples. So, well, there you have it, rotation. Continuing. How many of you are doing this? Run on main thread. Come on, you're doing it. I know you're doing it because I look at the application. Really? Not more? What are you using otherwise? Nothing? Okay. So if you have an event coming from another thread, and it happened there and you want to update the UI, you're not using run on UI thread? Async task? So what's the problem here? Going back to the first item I had, I create new. Let's say that this is a really frequent thing, like we get sensor data, so we get like 60 events per second or something like that, or even more. It's not really good to use this to update the user interface. So what should we use instead? Any? I heard something? Object pool? Oh, that's a good idea. Even better is to use the handler class. Now, you know you have a main loop in Android. You can't block the main loop. But you should also not create a lot of objects which gets garbage collected all the time. You could use like that first item had with the obtain and recycle all the time. But an even smarter way, if all you're going to do is update the user interface in some way here, and avoid creating new runnables, which you need to wrap this thing in, is do the following. You create a new handler, you give it a main looper, so you can pass in events there. You get a callback in the handle message, where you check, like, is this an event I'm going to handle? And then you just main handler, obtain message, pass in the data, send to target. And voila, you're not creating any new objects here. So you get this event from another thread, passed into the main looper, everything gets updated, no garbage collecting happening in this pass here. Really much better for your application and your performance and everything. This is a trick I learned from one app developer I talked to a long time ago. So have you thought about doing an app which is you can upgrade to premium? Now the standard procedure is usually to release two applications, one that is paid and one that is free. Well, that's really a hassle for the user. They have to download another application, lose all their data maybe if you didn't do it the right way. So do it this way instead. This is one way of doing it, of course. You could just modify the fragment or something like that as well, but just to provide another alternative here, enabling and disabling components, it works with every component. It works with activities, it works with broadcast receivers, it works with services, content providers, you name it. So all you need to do is to enable the free one by default and disable the premium one by disable the premium one by default. So, and then once the user updates using an in-app purchase or whatever other way they do it, you just call this method, get the package manager, tell the package manager to toggle the enabled state for that application. So you have two icons that will show up in the launcher, but now you toggle them on and off, and the home screen will automatically show the one that's enabled. Now this toggling on and off is something you should do when you have the auto starting. How many of you auto start your application through boot completed? Yeah. Okay. Would you say that that's the only way to get it auto started? Even the first time? There is another alternative that is actually much better, because boot completed only happens once in the boot cycle. And maybe the user doesn't reboot his phone for a very long time. But one event that does happen frequently is user present, which happens every time the user unlocks the screen. Now, you shouldn't start up and run your show UI every time this is happening. Of course, you should have some check in your broadcast receiver that deals with this. But this is much safer, actually. A better way to do the user present, auto-starting thing. Moving on. Oh, I'm really going fast. Am I going too fast? No. Great. Custom binder operations. So why would you want to do some advanced binder operations, really? Some good examples? How many of you use the application Dash Clock on your Android home screen? Do you know what the Dash Clock application is? It's a really nice application made by Roman Nurik, I think, at Google, that lets you add a widget on your home screen which has plugin support for other applications. Other application developers can write plugins for that application, which is really cool, which is one of the best things with Android. You can actually do the real plugin thing, which you can't do on the other major platforms. But in order to do that, you have to use a binder or the service API. The AIDLs is usually what people use. How many of you have worked with IDL before? And how do you feel about versioning for those? That doesn't really work, right? No IDL solution, whether it's Android AIDLs or any other IPC wrapper thing, it's terrible in managing versions control. So you can't update the API in that way, in a very easy way. So what you do instead, one way of doing it is using what I call the custom binder operations. You treat it like a web server, or like a RESTful API. You have request and response. You create a parcel, which is the request, where you put the data into it. You create a response parcel, which will receive the data that's done when the transaction is done. It's called transaction when you do a communication with a service over the binder. This allows you to do it faster, without the overhead of the AIDL, and you can do version control in this in the same way as you do version control for any REST API. So this is on the client side. So on the service side, you have in the service, you have a method onBind, which you need to implement. And onBind returns a binder. So this is a binder that you implement, a custom one. And it has the onTransact method. And this is the one that actually responds to the request. So by using this, you can build a really fairly advanced API which third-party applications can use. So, and there is another reason why you want to mess around with a binder. So anyone looked at the binder API? So anyone looked at particular? So it's worth diving into the Android APIs in a very deep level to get a feel for the truly best parts. I bet they have tons of fun writing these things. There's also a tweet which you should have a look at. Okay. So you use SQLite for your content providers, I guess. So when you learn database design, you learn the normalization rules, and you should like split up your tables in different things and have foreign keys and triggers and stuff. You use that, right, on your SQL, right? You use that in your Android content providers? Some people were nodding. So the common thing is like you get taught this in school. And of course, I know this is one of the simple things. You shouldn't really do it like this. This is a very naive example, of course. But if you look in the Android source code, you see that actually the Google and Android engineers did this from the beginning with a lot of the databases. They're a mess. They're very, very bad. And you suffer in performance and everything like that. You don't want to do joins on SQLite if you can avoid it. So don't do this. Use this approach instead. Make it a straight table here. never mind what your database teacher taught you in university. This is really okay to do. And you can even have these numbers here as constants in your class in Java, and then point them to a string resource or whatever. That's perfectly okay. Now, when you do your content provider, you have the SQLite, and you have your database helper class, which creates and updates the database, right? So do you put your SQL code there as strings? Yeah, I'm noticing I'm in Sweden. So the most common thing, and if you look at examples, they also put the SQL in strings there and concatenate them, and it's a mess. You can't read it. You don't really know what it does. A much better way is to put them in your raw resources. And this is like, whenever I tell people this, like, put them in there. Why? What's better there? It's like, it doesn't make any difference, really. Well, how many do you write tests for your databases? You don't, right? Well, okay, one. Great. No, this is the thing. People really avoid writing tests for the databases, specifically the database code they do. This you don't really need to run on the emulator. You can run this all, on the side. It's great. So if you put them on the side here, it's much easier to manage. They're not part of the Java code because it's not Java code. So treat them as it is, as text, SQL. Start doing that. You have to write a little method that reads the resource as a byte string and then into a string and executes SQL. But I mean, that's a really small thing. Database transaction. How many of you do transactions in your content providers? Not so much, right? So you usually have the insert method here. So I split it up here. So I have the do insert, which is my private function, which does the same thing as insert usually does. How many of you have implemented bulk insert? Not so many. So let's look how to do that. It's really simple. You do begin transaction, you loop through your content values array, do the insert there, and then set transaction successful. Enormous performance gain by doing that. I can really tell when I notice that an application doesn't do this. It's really noticeable. What's the problem here with this method? It only works for insert. What if you want to delete and update, or you want to do some complex database operations? Because sometimes we'd actually do. You might delete 10 rows or something like that. So there is actually another one called apply batch, which lets you do all the kinds of modification operations, like insert, delete, and update. You implement this one in your content provider. It gets an array, a list of content provider operations, and get the result for this as well. So you implement it like this, and the way to use it is real simple. Let's say you want to delete. You have an array of IDs you want to delete from the database. You call it like this. You loop through there. You create a number of content provider operations. You add them to the array, you pass it in with apply batch to the right authority. And the content provider will figure itself out how to use this and do a transaction around it.
Which is the minimum API level to use these methods?
I should know that, right? I don't know. I pass. I think it's past 10, 11 at least. It's like probably a ICS. I think it's 15, if I'm not wrong. So yeah, sorry, you can't use this below ice cream sandwich, I believe. Well, we can check it later. That's the best question so far. Okay, so I talked about APIs earlier. Yep. Yeah. He just had a better question.
I didn't hear the question.
I'm using new. Yeah, I couldn't fit into the whole bad excuse thing I'm coming up with right now here. Yes, completely right. 2 points up there to the left. Of course, if this would be done very frequently, yes, you're completely right. But if I doubt that we do like 10 database operations per second all the time. So in this case, it's probably okay. But yes, you're correct. On the other hand there, yeah, it's a new array list I'm creating here, yeah, true. I should save that one and just create it once or something. So I was talking about APIs, like the Dash Clock application on Google Play. It's really great. I advise you to check it out. So, but what if you have an API where multiple applications will be able to read and write to your content provider, but you want to protect them so that they can only read and write their own information, and then you have one single UI which displays it from many points. For instance, a contact book where multiple social feeds can input information. That would be one example. So you have like Twitter inputting data, and your Facebook inputting data, and your Google Plus inputting data, theoretically speaking here. So one thing that the permissions in Android, they are like, either you allowed to do this or you're not allowed to do this. There is like no way to distinguish on a smaller granular level. So if you want to filter out, say like you have a content provider where you want to filter out, so you only get the rows that what the calling application actually also inserted. There is an API for that, but it's not very much used. So it looks like this. It's from the binder. So in your call from another application into your content provider, you do binder get calling UID, and you get the user ID, the Linux user ID for that application that you can then use in the package manager to get which packages match this one. Usually there is only one package that matches this one, but since you can have a shared user ID on Android applications, it's an array. But what you do is you just check that, return the first one in this case, and then you can, that's a string, and that's the unique ID. Now you know who is calling you, not just someone with the right permission, but actually which application it is, and that way you can filter it. This can be used in many different ways as well. Using the package manager, you can get the public signature of that application, and if you have the public signature of the application in a safe way, which is this is done, let's say you have an online service where they register their application in order to be allowed to talk to you. You have a second level of security where they first have to register their signature online, saying this is the signature of my application and this is my package name. And that way you can look up online and see if they really are allowed to do this, not just have declared the permission. And there's no way to get through this unless actually the key from the third-party application would get leaked, but hopefully it won't. And in that case, you can just block it. Besides writing Java, how many of you write in C? Yes, a few. How many of you have done J&I development? 1, 2, 3. So what do you think? Would you say it's simple? It's hard. First of all, it's rather hard to find good guides on how to do it. You look at the samples in the Android NDK, it's like, I don't really know. Doesn't really give me that much. Just give me the top layer there. So I'm going to show you two very simple examples, but that illustrates how easy it actually is to use J&I in your Android application. So you start with this. We're going to do a sorting in native. Of course, we're going to do sorting. That's absolutely has to be moved to native. The first thing you have to think about is yes, you should load your native library, which you will be compiling with Android NDK, in this way. Not in the constructor, not in another way. Just do it like this, because a class in Java just is loaded once, and this way make sure it will only load the library once. You declare the native method, and the next step is to execute the following command on your terminal command line. Java H, and you give it the class path, and you give it an output path. Oh, sorry. Is it okay? You give it an output path, and you give it a class name. And the class name is which class it should use to generate the header files. Is my microphone better? Okay, let's hope it stays like that. So, you run this, and it will generate a header file. I have the technician coming down here. I'm probably running around too much, am I? Nope. Okay, I'll continue talking here. So it generates a file, and as this file says, do not edit this file. What you should do is the bold marked text here, you just mark that one and copy it, and you create a C file which you implement everything in. And it looks like this. You include jni.h. For those of you who doesn't do... Okay. This is a debate for a whole different session. No, the main thing. I think I'm moving around too much, right? Uh-huh. Okay, shall turn this off and talk. Yeah, I guess we got the video. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Delete global reference is the last thing you do then. We release the callback object we passed in, and we detach this thread from the VM. Otherwise, it will be stale there and leaking memory and stuff, which we don't really want to avoid. So this is the really simple example of using a native library or native code you have. So if you have something that you really want to use, you find it and there is only available in C or C++. Now you have a good example how to do it, both in a single-threaded, synchronous callback and in an asynchronous callback. It's not very hard to do this. It's just you have to keep everything straight. Remember to release references, etc., etc. Okay. Hidden APIs. I skipped forward. So whenever you're going to use hidden APIs, this site is the place to start. Android Xref. Why would you want to use hidden APIs? Because you want to use the features in the platform which is really not official, but which you can use, of course. There are tons of stuff that you can do for this. Google themselves have a lot, and I mean a lot of examples where they do this in the documentation, like the HTTP cache, for instance, but also other stuff. One of my favorites is actually a problem for many application developers, is that whenever the user turns on Wi-Fi tethering, their application crashes. So they need to be able to check whether Wi-Fi tethering is on. Anyone experienced that problem? I have. So there is no official API for checking if the Wi-Fi tethering is enabled. But everything in the Wi-Fi manager, if you go into that class through the Android Xref, or you check the source code in some other way, you will see that there are a bunch of methods and constants in that class, which has a Java doc annotation @hide. That's the only way they make sure that it doesn't appear in the official API. Everything is still there. You can either use reflection like this to retrieve it, or you can compile your own SDK where you say that show everything, don't care about the hide parameter, and you get all the methods in all the classes. Now, of course, this is not guaranteed to work. That's why it's not an official thing. So any vendor, or vendors who like to modify Android in a very heavy way, no names, they could change this. So you have to check that everything is correct, of course. So if you're doing network applications and you notice that sometimes the network just crashes for some weird reasons, this is a good check to add. Is Wi-Fi AP enabled? Oh yeah, okay, it's enabled. Now I really need to handle this in a, reset all my network connections, etc., etc. Another way, interesting way, and there are far too few applications that actually do this. You can get the Wi-Fi configuration, Wi-Fi AP configuration, when the user turns on Wi-Fi tethering. This also contains a password, which is actually not a security issue in itself, because you can't enable Wi-Fi tethering through an application, but you can just get the information there. So you could broadcast what people have on their Wi-Fi tethering devices if you manage to get the app installed. But you can do other fun stuff here. You can launch an activity that lets the user easily enable the Wi-Fi AP. You can change this Wi-Fi AP configuration. I don't think there was permission required for that. So you can have a helper application, which would be nice because it's still kind of messy. Sharing the Wi-Fi password for your Wi-Fi tethering through a barcode or something. There are many examples here. Okay, that's how to use the hidden APIs. Go to Android Xref, use reflections, search for the @hide, and you're home. So how many use a sync task in their activity to get network stuff done? Yeah, that's fine. So what happens when you leave the activity and go in there again quickly back and forth? Will you keep triggering a new sync task every time?
Bad things happen.
Yes, bad things happen. A sync task is very nice to do async tasks, but you shouldn't really do networking on them. Although there are examples from Google that does it, so avoid that one. A much better design is to set it up like this. you have an activity, of course. That's what the user starts. You have a service, and you have a content provider which stores the data. So the activity will start, it will connect to the content provider and read up all the data that's cached. It will tell the service, like, download new data. And the service does a network call. Now this is good, because now if you quit the activity, it will keep doing the network call properly and make sure that that runs as it should. You should probably use an intent service here. Should probably written that. Once this is done, download the data, parsed it, you write it to the content provider. Now if the activity is still connected and visible, it happens by itself. So you don't have to do much else. Now you would be surprised how many times I see people not using this, because every time I talk about this with developers, they're like, yeah, sure, that's correct. But we tend to be lazy, so we implement our activity, and then we add everything in the activity, and then we start noticing there is problems. So we have the activity writing to the content provider and back and forth like that, and then we get weird effects sometimes. Move everything that doesn't have to do with the user interface into a service. I have 10 minutes left, right? I think I actually might finish all the slides. Okay. Pull or push, which is best? Pull. Is one of my colleagues from Spotify saying so? Yeah, let's pull more from Spotify. I think we should do that. Okay, so this is not an easy question. So, but one thing to consider this is, like, if you know that every time you call the network you will have new data, maybe you shouldn't do pushing every time there is new data, because then it will be, you will waking up the phone all the time. So like a newsreader you should probably not push the data to it. You should pull the data when you need to instead. And people do polling all kinds of different ways. And this is the only way you should do polling when it comes to networking. Use Alarm Manager, schedule an so-called inexact repeating alarm. And this is a really good method, the set inexact repeating, because it doesn't, if you say 15 minutes, it will happen every 15 minutes, but every call will wake up all applications that register for 15 minutes at the same time. So there will be 4 times each hour where the applications who register for this polling event will awake at the same time. So it won't be spread out evenly over an hour and keep the battery drained. So when you choose to do polling, which you should consider doing actually every time you start doing networking, and not just dive in to do push notifications all the time. This is how you do it, no other way. Don't create your own thread which counts down, don't do anything other special. Use the Alarm Manager and nothing else. So that was all my examples. So you remember everything now, so if I say that, no. Yeah, so that's basically show some parts of the book. I will go to questions right now, but if you want to know more about the book there, so you can go to that address. Also, yes, questions there.
What do you think about the sync framework in Android?
The sync.
I mean, there is an count and sync framework that you can use in Android.
Repeat the question.
The count and sync framework in Android. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly which one you mean.
The one that all the Google services uses, like they have the sync framework.
Sync adapters. Yes, sync adapters is of course great, but that requires you to create an account basically. If you have to create an account, and maybe that's not always what you want to do. So yeah, sync adapter. Basic sync adapters will also use the Alarm Manager in the background somehow there. So.
So you talked a lot about avoiding garbage collection.
Mm-hmm.
Is that also a problem in the recent releases, or is it more for the...
It's getting less and less of a problem, but garbage collection will always, by nature, be a problem, of course. It takes CPU, it needs CPU time, and sure, the CPU is faster and you have more cores, but basically you still have to halt the world at some time to collect all the objects. So,
Erik, Can you repeat the question?
Oh,
please?
sorry, yes. What about the garbage collection? Is garbage collection improving and reducing the problem with creating new objects? Is VM getting better? Yes, of course it's getting better, and the problem is less and less severe. But if you really want a state-of-the-art, really good application, you should still consider these facts, not allocating objects unnecessarily. Because you're not running alone on this device. There are other applications running as well. And if you're misbehaving, they will uninstall you, because they will sooner or later notice that you're the one causing it to run slow and drain battery and all these things. Yes, more questions?
Tougher questions.
Tougher questions, yes.
Let's say the Android developers called you and said that you could change something or improve something. Just one thing, what would that be?
What would you improve?
You mean anything? I would basically rip out how the UI is rendered and composed and replace it with a better approach. And I'm not going to go into details of which better approach there are. iOS does it the best way possible. I think the UI, it's so hard to make the UI snappy and responsive. Much because there are so much things happening on the main thread, and the main thread is also responsible for updating UI. And people keep doing that anyway. I mean, when you have a service in the onStart command, and if you do something there, it's still happening on the main thread. So there's a lot of things happening on the main thread that we don't think will affect the UI, but which actually does. This is why it's important to reduce both the garbage collection calls, but also try to move everything away to this background thread through an intent service, or, well, if you need a sync task, sure, do that. There was some other question here? Yeah?
About lessening the amount of GC and trading that for memory usage. Isn't memory also quite a scarce resource on smartphones today?
Less and less. I don't think we have to worry so much about running out of memory as we have to run out of CPU. CPU times, rather, but yes?
What profiler tools do you use?
Profile tools? Well, actually the one that comes with the SDK mostly. And I rarely run into the problem where I actually need to analyze it in much deeper level. Sure, if I take over someone else's application, I do that. But I use the free available tools mostly. The ones that come with SDK and Android Studio and, you know, those things. It works well enough. Sure, there are better ones, and especially if you're doing OpenGL debugging, for instance, then you need to go to the vendor for that chipset and run it. But most of those are really tricky to use. I think the one from Qualcomm only runs on Windows, for instance, or something like that. Yeah. Good question there. No, I don't know who should give book. Still think where are you the new? Yeah, there you are. I still think you win there. Yeah. More questions? Or should I let you go? Yeah, there were one more. Yeah.
Not a question, but you can make that first code you threw out faster with double check logging.
Yeah.
Repeat.
True. So how can I make that code in the first example faster using the reentrant locks, you mean? Yeah, so true, you could use reentrant locks there instead. That is completely true, although I'm wondering how much of a problem it will be, how much improvement it will be. But yeah, definitely, it is an improvement you can do.
Which are the best information sources on programming, would you say?
For Android? Or in general?
When you find yourself you have to do something and you don't know how to do it, where would you go?
Google.
Yeah. Google. Well, usually I just turn around and ask Marcus, who sits behind me. These days. And I worked with some really smart people back in the days in Sony, so I used to walk over to them and try to be cute.
But are there any forums?
Yeah, so that's actually my point is there is it's really hard to find it, but try to find the people. My best advice these days is actually Find a group on Facebook where people respond fast. Stack Overflow is good for searching, but you don't get a response there really quick, usually, if you have a complex question. But find a forum where people are willing to discuss with you. So that, like, we have the Swedish Code Opera group, which is great. There is like high and lows there. So actually, that's my point. Get into the right social group who deal with the same thing and get to know them. Yeah, social networking. That's actually what I find most rewarding when it comes to finding information these days. More questions there?
Are you right, the second edition, when they changed the ART and all the...
Repeat.
Am I going to update the whole book when they change to ART? We'll see if they change to the ART first. We're not sure. But yeah, well, I hope I will write the second edition. Depends on how good it sells, I guess. But yeah.
What was the most challenging part while writing the app for Spotify?
Since I've been working there for a month.
What have you heard? What was the most difficult part to do?
No, I don't know, sorry. It's a multi-platform company. There's a big challenge.
Battery.
Yeah.
And battery life is a big issue with Spotify. I'm also from Spotify, by the way. But I don't work on the Android stuff. I work on the back end. But I know battery is a big issue. You know.
But I'll be working on that as much as I can. So I'll start.
Yeah.
In 2 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, networking calls and when to do them. So you efficiently use the battery, really.
Yeah.
We even had a guy doing a master thesis on this, I think. PhD, sorry. Monitoring the battery level on how much Spotify was draining it. I don't have the results, I'm sorry, but yeah. We are looking at it.
I could give a whole another session about why actually it consumes so much data, battery when you use mobile data. What you can do to reduce it. And funny enough, one of the best platforms when it comes to reducing battery consumption on 3G or mobile data was Windows Mobile, not Windows Phone. Windows Mobile had a special feature, thanks to Qualcomm actually, which allowed it to reduce the battery consumption for active sync calls enormously. I can explain it in more detail later, but...
You're out of time, Erik.
Yeah, sorry, I'm out of time. Thank you very much for listening.
Hold on. You're going to give away a book.
I still think the guy who noticed that I did knew too much there is winning this one. So you can come down here later. I will give you the signed copy of the book. Congratulations.
So warm hand, Jerry. Come on. Thank you. And now it's lunch, I think.